Männer, es war ein langer Krieg. Ihr habt tapfer und stolz für euer Vaterland gekämpft. Seid eine besondere Truppe, die ineinander...
Hey everyone, this is the Hydra Hut, and we're going to talk about Chapter 3 of Klaus. So if you've been following along, Chapter 1 we learned who Klaus and Santa basically is, how he found the town of Grimsvig where this story is taking place, and how he came to start making toys. In Chapter 2 we saw his first attempt at delivering the toys to the children in town, the hijinks that occurred within, and when we left Chapter 2, the Emperor had just sicked the hounds on Klaus, using a sack that he had left behind from when he was carrying toys. So again, the story is by Grant Morrison, art by Dan Mora. He does the penciling and coloring. And let's get started. Trying something a little different on lighting, so hopefully we don't have all the same glare issues. As Chapter 3 starts, we're back in Grimsvig with Santa running from the hounds. We have fantastic art again. Those hounds, still rabies infested and jacked up, ready to hunt down Santa. Santa, of course, immediately finds a dead end, turns around, the hounds are circling and surrounding him. As he's looking around, he's... Oops, I skipped a page. As he turns, he sees the hounds, and he knows he's screwed, and he's trying to figure out what's going to happen, when all of a sudden, the hounds start acting up, turn into cowards, and we see Lily show up. Looking great. Santa's stoked to see his friend. He told her to stay outside because he knew the town was dangerous for her, but he's grateful that she showed up anyway. We get this nice little reunion scene between the two of them with Lily looking sweet. And then she turns back and, of course, scares the hounds off. Santa tells Lily that she has to leave immediately because he doesn't want her getting hurt. As the hounds run away, they see the guards who had sent them after Santa. The guards see how scared they are. One of them says the only time he's ever seen something like that was with a wolf, giant wolf. That freaks the guards out. They're not happy about the wolves. One of them even says this isn't part of his contract. Some jokes are made. I'll let you guys read that and find that out on your own. They also start throwing around the idea that this is either a wolf man or maybe a ghost, because as they come to the clearing where the dogs came running from, there is nothing. Next page, we see that Santa has actually climbed up onto the rooftops as the guards are still going on about the possibility that this is either a wolf or a ghost. They tell the sergeant, who we saw in Chapter 1 as actually being a semi-decent guy. He pretty much mocks him for the idea, but goes along with it. And tells him to guard every door and make sure that this Santa Claus character doesn't appear ever again. Then we get this great double-page spread. Shows Santa up on the rooftop, checking out the town of Grimsvig. We have the mountains. So Dan does his snow as these kind of like square blotches that you can see here. But if you notice, on the page there's also these actual squared off with nice sharp angles and black edging, and those are actually letters that are coming out of the chimneys of all the houses. You see Santa going, not quite sure what's going on there. And as the panels progress, we see they're coming out of the chimneys, and we pan back down to our little friend the Ginger, who's throwing her wishes into the fireplace, and we can assume all the other children are as well. And then it gets a little dark as we go back to the mines, where the children's fathers are working away, digging away at the coal. They're screaming about the hours. They're complaining about this voice that they hear in the mines that's driving them insane. They're about ready to riot when the guards announce that the Emperor is showing back up. Before we see him, though, we get an immediate pan back to the town. They're still talking about unrest and how the people in the mines are really not going to stick up or keep being so obedient for so long. We get an image of inside the house as the kids are still burning away their wishes. The father gets home, sits down. They start trying to get some Christmas cheer out of their dad, but he's just not having it. He's had too rough of a day. And then we get this fist grabbing a wish from the sky. We assume it's the father, because he has bandaged arms, much like this arm here. But if you look, he's not actually wearing gloves, whereas the hand holding the wish does. Foreshadowing or bad editing? We'll probably find out later. As we switch pages, we also switch scenes back to the Emperor's wife and the little bastard's mother. We see her muttering to herself, "I wish," as she watches the wishes float away into the distance, and her husband shows up, startling her. Starts accusing her of going mad, talking to herself. And just look at the different shape of her face now. When she first showed up, she was very cold, very stern, only semi-attractive in some pages. But as we get to know her more, her features soften up. She gets more gentler, more kind-looking. It's an interesting transformation from the artist side of the story. Anyway, her husband starts accusing her of going crazy. She throws it back in his face, and they start bickering about what's going on. He sees she's still clutching a toy, and he jerks it out of her hand, and realizes that in his mind this is the perfect thing to deliver poison, and it's definitely a weapon. It's not a toy. It couldn't be a toy. No way they'd give toys to kids. As she calls him crazy and demands he gives it back, he crushes it and then asks her basically whose side she's on, Santa's or his, and that only one side can win. And then he leaves. We see him again walking with his guards. He's speaking of madness as they're walking down a large hallway, and then they mention that there's bad news from the mines. The final panel of this page is the Emperor's wife sitting sadly out on where he left her, basically. As the story progresses, they're always really hinting at the fact that she's a victim here. She doesn't... Well, you'll see. We switch scenes again to some flowers coming out of the snow. We see Santa, Klaus, harvesting the flowers as he's talking to Lily, and he makes a poultice to bandage up some wounds that he got while he was in town. This great little facial expression on Lily here as he's talking to her, even a little ruff. As Santa leans back against the tree, let his wounds heal, he starts reminiscing about the town, trying to figure out a better way to deliver the toys the next time. As he closes his eyes, we can see the forest starts to go back to our familiar LSD trip. The spirits start coming out of the woods, and he basically picks up his flute and starts, I guess, subconsciously playing it. Then we get this great shot of Lily as she opens up her eyes and sees the forest coming alive. We even get reflections of what's happening around her in her eyes. I thought that was pretty neat. As we jump back to the castle, I just want to show everybody this awesome artwork. Look at this wood grain of the ceiling, this stonework, the vaulted architecture. It's great. That is some good, solid backgrounds. But anyway, we're joining the Emperor back in the castle. He's entering a large library. He doesn't really have much to say, but he goes to a very specific spot, pulls out a very specific black book, and is talking to it like it would talk back to him. We jump back to the mines, where the guards are still, where the men are still working away. As one man starts to freak out about not being able to take the voices anymore, a guard suddenly whistles, telling everybody to stand down, clear away, the Emperor's shown up. He's actually a baron, but I'm going to keep calling him an emperor. As he enters the mines, he basically makes a direct beeline for the center area where everybody's been mining away. And we change scenes to a nice dark cave, Emperor standing alone in the middle of it, and he starts talking to something or someone. We can't see. All we can see are these dark, cavernous walls, and he's clearly upset at what's going on, and he starts to argue with whoever he's talking to. And that's when a large coal wall explodes at him, and he explodes at him like it's saying something. We even get some sort of like scribble dialect to kind of illustrate the point coming out of a speech bubble. The Emperor responds back very aggressively. I want to read this, but I don't want to ruin the story, so I'm just going to kind of gloss over what's happening here. But this is very, very telling for what's going to happen in the future, and this book is about to take a very, very dark turn. We jump scenes again to a church where they're giving a sermon, talking about how we have to be thankful for what we have. Don't go outside. They're just kind of illustrating that the Emperor is using religion as another way to keep his people under control. Could be an allegory for something, could just be some filler because this time is a pretty religious time in history. Either way, as the sermon is going along, the church bell starts to ring. There's no reason for it to be ringing, which causes the pastor to freak out. All the citizens inside the church rush outside to see what's going on. And that's when we see the familiar P rune that we saw earlier in chapter 1. As we change pages, we see Klaus atop one of the steeples, looking down at the scene below, and that's when the town basically tells us, or the people of the town basically tell us, this is the rune of joy, which is a rune that's oriented around the Yule time and the Yulerness. As they're trying to figure out what's going on, the Emperor suddenly shows up. The townspeople are kind of freaked out that the dude never sleeps and is always showing up at the worst possible time. And of course, he immediately starts yelling at them and accusing them of pulling some sort of prank. In this panel right here, you can see the spire where Santa is on. And we see a rope going from it down to the castle. Now as we move down the page, we see Santa sliding down this rope, a la every 80s action film ever. The town, the Emperor is still yelling at people in the town, claiming that this Santa Claus isn't real and they need to come forth and stop lying about it. And if he was real, they would be close to capturing him. And then we get this last panel, which shows his wife sitting alone near her window, which would suggest that maybe Santa's going there. But as we change pages, we see that he's not actually going to her room, but he is going into the castle. And he's looking at a large dead tree in the center of the castle. Before walking up to it, he starts talking to the tree, and basically the dialogue establishes that Santa's been here before. He's actually made a toy out of this tree back when it was a living tree. And then he pulls his axe from his belt, and we see a set of hands holding the crushed toy. Now, notice, Klaus's hands, the hands holding the crushed toy, Klaus's hands again. We also see the bandaged arms and the same style glove that was holding the wishes a few pages back. And if you recognize that crushed toy, that's the bird that the Emperor's wife had that she was playing with, he crushed and then gave back to her, suggesting that Klaus made that toy from this tree, gave it to the Emperor's wife back when she was a child. And then we've changed scenes back to the Emperor still freaking out on the citizens, and he's finally finishing up with his lecture. And he's demanding that the real Santa show his face when one of his men says, My lord! And he turns to see the large tree from his castle barreling down the road at him on fire, his men running away in terror. And his only words are, now this. As the tree rushes down, the Emperor doesn't move, he just glares it into a stop, and then turns and says, this means war. As we finish up this page, we see Klaus entering the Emperor's wife's room. He says, hello, Dagmar. How long has it been? This is actually the first time we see that her name is actually Dagmar. And it's also the first time that they fully confirm that Klaus and Dagmar have some history. And look at that pose. That's, if Santa wasn't so chaste, he'd be leaving laid. And that's actually the end of chapter 3. Chapter 4 and 5 start to get really dark, really good. So if you can handle sticking it through my poor narration, I definitely recommend it. Anyway, thanks for listening. It's the Hydra Hut. Hail Hydra, baby.